So, coming at you from two different parts of the United States of America, you have myself, the host, Alexis Hardwick, on the podcast 22 at the Lips. This is a podcast from EMS providers to EMS providers and anybody and everybody in between. I do have a raspy voice. I want to apologize in advance. I'm trying to fight something inside my sinus system right now. It's pretty rough. I do apologize. But today I have with me Ben. Ben has been, no pun intended, in EMS for, he said he's going on about his 14th year. I'm going to let him introduce himself, give his credentials, his roles, then tell us who you are, what you stand for.
So thank you for the quick introduction. Yeah, I am Ben. I have been Ben my entire life. So currently I am in West Virginia, born and raised. In typical EMS fashion, I wear many hats, many titles. I'm a career firefighter paramedic where I currently hold the rank of lieutenant and training officer. Additionally, outside of fire station life, I work as the assistant chief of operations at a mid-sized EMS agency for West Virginia, where I've been at this same agency for going on 11 years now. Started out just kind of as part-time here and there, and came into full-time and was working as training officer, and then got promoted to assistant chief of operations. Still oversee all the education, training, and those things. Then on my other spare time, I'm a senior educator for Mass Year Medics. I'm still affiliated as a adjunct professor at our local community college. Where previously, before my position of assistant chief here at our EMS agency, I was a paramedic program director for about 7 years, and I've been deeply involved in emergency services for, as Alexis said, about 14 years now. I'm a third generation firefighter. My grandfather was a firefighter in the Air Force. My father was a career firefighter and retired as fire chief about 7 years ago or so. And actually kind of only ever got into EMS, just hoping it would help my career in the fire service. And then once I got in, I really just kind of deeply fell in love with it. I love the critical thinking aspect of it, the ever evolvingness of it, and just heavily and deeply involved in education, progressing, and just being as much as an advocate for emergency services as possible.
As anybody in EMS knows, it is a kind of a short turnover in this career field because you can move on, you can do other things, et cetera, et cetera. But I would count 14 years in EMS as like a lifetime, just because that's quite an extensive amount of time in this field.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think um, anecdotally read some numbers a while back. Where it's like the average career expectancy for a paramedic is somewhere around 5 to 7 years now. So I guess we could count it in not dog years, but paramedic years. And yeah, this is about 2 careers so far.
Exactly. And then you have all the memes of like it's like someone that looks super young and it's like 10 years later in EMS and it's like a grandpa. So that's kind of what I think about like with the many extensive years of being in EMS. That's just me though. So I have a couple of rapid fire questions I did not prepare you for just because I want the real, genuine, honest answers. Are you ready?
Ready?
All right. What's your favorite color?
Probably black.
Same. I respect that because anytime I say that, people are like, oh, that's not a color. It's very classy. It's a very classy color.
Yeah, like black, gray, and then the complete opposite, white. And I guess it just kind of depends on what color you're looking for. Like color of vehicle, color of shoes, a shirt, a hat. It's a pretty loaded question.
You can never go wrong with a neutral.
Yeah, I'd say typical, emergency service people, you open a closet and it's like navy blue everywhere. And mine is, yeah, I mean, it's a mix of that and lots of darks, lots of dark colors.
Nothing wrong with it. My second question. One food you cannot live without. What is that one meal? What is that side entree? Like, what is something that you eat that you cannot live without?
Ooh. So I am just overall a huge fan of foods. That's really difficult. I mean, one of the first things that came to mind, I guess maybe as I'm a diabetic, so this is really bad to say, but probably pizza. I've I have a weakness for carbs.
Nothing wrong with a little bit of cheese and pepperoni.
Yeah, the cheese and pepperoni's not what gets me. It's all the like
It's the bread.
flour and wheat and all the other sources of carbohydrates that my pancreas does not like.
I think I forgot what pizza, fast food pizza brand. I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong one. They have these things called pizza bowls that it's like all of the toppings of the pizza without the crust. You want to invest stock in that because they're amazing. Highly recommend. And it's without all the carbs and meat. So, like, maybe it's a good compromise for you, my guy.
That could maybe be a halfway. And I've done like the cauliflower pizzas. I mean, they're okay, but then sometimes I can't tell if I was actually eating the box that the pizza came in. So
Exactly. Sometimes the healthy alternative is not always the best alternative.
yeah, sure.
So, I wanted to bring Ben on to talk about something that I feel like is near and dear to my heart. And it's the idea of transitioning from being an EMT to being a paramedic, graduating, um, as we call it in Louisiana and some other places, getting your gold patch because it's the National Registry gold glittery patch. But there's not only a knowledge based difference, but it's also kind of like this take charge effectiveness that you have in that process and in that transition. So, kind of wanted to give like my input, let Ben give some of his input. Um, and I'll kind of start it off. For me, the biggest thing of that transition was the knowledge and the studying. And not even just that through paramedic school, but it's also the continuing to study because EMS is kind of I don't want to say a profession in its baby stages, but it's a newer profession as compared to like in the healthcare system, like doctors and nurses that have been around forever and ever. EMS is still relatively new and it's ever evolving because as people and in healthcare, we are all ever evolving. We're finding new studies, we're doing new data, and it's it's most beneficial for our patients and for ourselves as providers. But it's also the fact of while you're in paramedic school, it's the medicine, it's the differential diagnoses, it's the body systems, etc. It's not just you arrive on scene, I'm going to call for ALS backup. Like you are the ALS backup. And for me, that was the biggest part of paramedic school doing scenarios. I literally, my first scenario, I was like, BSI, scene save, uh, going through the checklist. And I was like, I'm going to call for ALS backup. And my instructor looked at me and she said, Alexis, you are the ALS backup. And I started sweating. And I was like, oh no, what have I done? So, with that, I think another big aspect is the responsibility. With all of these things combined, with all of this weight on your shoulders, your patient's life is in your hands. Whether it's the one at 3 a.m. that's throwing up, if it's the one who you get in the doorway and you make that instinctively sick or not sick, um, the one that is trapped in the car, the one that is having a baby in the back of the ambulance, like you are responsible. And I would even venture to say that if you work in a system where your EMT can ride some calls. At the end of the day, like you are the higher level of care. And that's not a pat on the back to being a para douchebag. Like it's the aspect of you are the higher level of care. You've studied for that. You've worked your butt off for that. So on scene, you're kind of looked at as the one with the answers, even if you don't have the answers. Like somebody told me one time, if you don't know what to do something. And I've kind of adopted that from my transition from EMT to paramedic. If I'm sitting here asking the patient questions and I don't know something, I'll just take a blood pressure because I'm like, let me think about it for a second. NIBP on the life pack. Here we go. Give me like 5 seconds to think about what I'm trying to do. And maybe that's just me being vulnerable, but that's just my thing. Um, so going back to kind of those differentials and body systems and medications and all the stuff you have to know, it's also that your patient and your patients do not fit the National Registry scenarios. They do not have just chest pain and it goes down the left arm. Oh, it's a STEMI, activate the protocols. Your patient can have two or three or five different things going on based on their medical history and whatever scenario is going on. And then you got to think about too, instead of just on a trauma call, you hold C spine, you splint something, like you're the one that needs to know about the internal bleeding. You're the one that needs to prioritize, do I splint this thing right now or do I take care of this or do I look out for this or do I like it is such a bigger responsibility and that's why it should be harder to become a paramedic in my opinion. Um then I'll let you kind of take over if you have any pointers, tips, things that helped you along the way in your transition.
As we said the years ago, it's like a old salty guy, but to say that that was so long ago, but at the same time, it feels like that it wasn't. I mean, it's a whole different aspect when you're looking back on that point of what you could have done then. I mean, that cliche saying, "I wish I knew then what I know now." I mean, even still, my you know umpteenth year as a paramedic now of last year, I was like, man, I wish I'd have known then what I know now. So I think one of the weirdest things for me going from EMT to paramedic, man, I'd been an EMT for almost 2 years when I went to paramedic school, was one, as I say, having academic momentum. So, as I said, I've been deeply involved in emergency services, education, fire rescue, and EMS for, the most part of the past decade. And the thing that I have always personally seen out of my students and colleagues is discipline. Whenever I went to paramedic school, people, paramedics kept, prep me up like, "Hey, man, it's a lot of hard work, so on, so on. Like, it's gonna consume your life." It's like, I at that point I'd already had a bachelor's degree. It's like, "Hey, I've been to college, I've been there, done that. Like, it is what it is. It's gonna be a walk in the park. I just got to go jump through the hoops, get there, and be done." And then when I got into school, I realized like, oh my, like how did I ever graduate college? Because the discipline I had was not what I needed for med class. But then you look back on the way that general undergraduate studies are is, you study up to get to this exam, and then you can almost brain dump, and you're basically just doing module comprehension, just going step to step to step. Then like you're not going through the reps. So you're in paramedic school, and it's like, man, if I don't know this, this could be detrimental to somebody else's life. So you continually had to circle back and make sure that you were absorbing everything, not just getting through and worrying about the letter grade per se. As my undergraduate was like, well, I got to get this GPA to keep, this scholarships or to not get kicked out of college or to make my parents happy. You go to paramedic school, you're not even really focused mostly on the grades. I mean, everybody is, but you're mostly focused on do I know this or not? Am I really gonna screw up and kill somebody if I don't understand this thoroughly? So it's a lot of that intrinsic motivation, I think, that helps push through medic school. But one of the biggest, I think, debunking things, so going from EMT to paramedic, is that everybody says, well, you need to be an EMT for so long before you can go to paramedic school. That's not. Some of the very best colleagues I have went straight from EMT to paramedic because they had what I call is that academic momentum, that they went through the EMT class, they knew the roles and responsibilities, they knew how to study, they had that motivation and that drive to really want to be good. They weren't just, well, I got to go to medic school. I'm hung up as an EMT. I've plateaued. Now, so what I got to do to advance? Like, no, I want to be the best. So they really push through. In my 8 years at the college, we always gave out Student of the Year awards to, I mean, we run varying cohorts on like, we would run programs, on two, three, four campuses sometimes, in a single cohort, like on our main campus, average around 30, 35 students. And almost every year when the top student award was given, each one of those very new EMTs or went straight from EMT to paramedic every time, and all have went on. And I've also found some of those people who go and they're an EMT for a long time, then they plateau. Then they go become a paramedic because they feel like they've peaked. And then they hit their peak as a paramedic. And it's like, well, why are you really doing this transition? Why did you go from EMT to paramedic in the first place? Was it only to get promotion and more pay, or was it for the overall motivation of being a great pre-hospital care provider? Um, but the biggest difference, I think, from EMT to paramedic is, and this is location specific, is most EMT courses, at least like where we're from, are not college oriented. They are workforce or training center programs are run through local EMS agencies, and so the delivery there is not nearly as much as what's put through like an accredited paramedic program. So you go through higher education versus, local training centers, the delivery, the expectations from most EMT programs to a paramedic program is night and day difference. So everybody thinks a paramedic is their EMT class just longer, and they're not even relatable. It's just such a huge change, um, and I think going from EMT to paramedic, listen to those paramedics, take their advice, the ones that were successful. All the naysayers, the ones who failed out of paramedic class, don't listen to them. The people who fell out of paramedic class, to me, and maybe this is going to give me some slack, but the people who fell out of paramedic class are the ones who just don't want it bad enough. The ones that don't have that drive, the determination, and the willingness and the desire to push and go and do what is necessary to do. So don't listen to those naysayers about, oh, you can't do it, you're not ready. Only you know. I would go and sit down with everybody coming in and just like, hey, what's going on in your life? Where are you at right now? What's your job life like? What's your family dynamic life like? And there were students at times I just flat out like, listen, I can't tell you no to not come into this program, but I don't think this is a good time for you. Like, it will definitely consume your life. We kind of had that cliche thing of first night of medic class, you come in and it's like, hey, when you leave class, go home, kiss your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your significant other, your dog, your goldfish, tell them bye because you're not going to see them for the next, year to 18 months. And that's the truth. Paramedic is not a typical associate degree or community college program. It is like legit. When I got my master's degree, paramedic school, to get my master's degree was easier than getting my paramedic. Um, and like I graduated magna cum laude and all those fancy accolades from
Mhm.
grad school. And I think it's just because discipline of paramedic school and discipline in working emergency services pushed me and just created kind of that work ethic in me to be successful and just take things in stride. So, in that big long segue coming back, big things going from EMT to paramedic. Don't listen to the people who are just out bitching and complaining about how hard paramedic classes are. It's just so hard, da da da. If they failed it, it's probably their own fault. If they can't look and point at themselves, you know, uh, you know, I'm a big Jocko Willing fan too, and that whole yep, point the finger back at yourself and extreme ownership. Like, yeah, I screwed up. That's the reason I didn't. If they've got a list and list and list of excuses, they are to fault while they didn't succeed. Um, Study hard, just know everything. Ask questions. Don't be a person that goes to class and sits in the back. You you're only going to get out of what you put in. Um, Education as a whole is a lot like Sterling's law. So this is what I give on the very first class every day. I talk about Sterling's law. Like, hey, whatever work you put in is going to relate to your output of what you actually get. Just like your heart, you put in the effort, good Sterling's law, contractions, contractibility, elasticity of your heart,
Like,
good output. It's the same thing, education. The more you put into it, it's going to equate to the output that you get out. And just bust your ass and don't stop. Once you become a paramedic, doesn't mean that you've achieved it. Yeah, you just got your head out of the water. You're not walking on top of it yet, like some of these paragods think they are.
um, I just want to give a shout out to the people in the back about the Paragod complex because it is one thing I cannot stand. I'm going to put a pin in three kind of big topic things of what you said. Number one, it's that excellence to go above and beyond. It is definitely, it's more than just the studying, it's more than just passing a test, but it is that integrity within yourself to not only study to know, but study to be better and to continue to study. Like you said, it's not just a degree, it's not just a program and you're done because that's how you get stagnant and you die in this field. But it is an ever continuing process of learning and educating. Um, I do want to say that for the people who say like, oh, you have to be an EMT for a year, oh, you have to be an EMT for 2 years, I disagree wholeheartedly. I didn't go exactly zero to hero, but I started as an EMT in August of 2020 and started paramedic school January of 2021 and got my medic the next year. But I also know somebody that while they were still in their EMT course, started taking anatomy and physiology. And as soon as they were done with their EMT, went on to paramedic school. And he is a fantastic paramedic, fantastic paramedic. So anybody that tells you like, oh, you should be an EMT for this long, you're still going to be an EMT while you're in paramedic school. And that's how I look at it. Like you're building your skills of what you already have and what you've learned, but you're building onto them. Like you have your foundation as an EMT, but you're building onto them as well. And then one last thing of what you said was the ask questions. Somebody told me, and it kind of changed the way I looked at clinicals on the ambulance. I was, we had a call or something like that, obviously. And I didn't know a question to ask, or I didn't ask something more thoroughly. And I beat myself up to no end. My preceptor looked at me and they were like, hey, this is the perfect time to like realize these things. This is the perfect time to realize that maybe you didn't go into this depth of this type of question, or maybe you missed this question, or you missed this diagnostic tool. He was like, because right now you can fail and flounder and like you have people with you. He said in a couple of months, when you get your patch, it's just you and you won't have somebody to fall back on. So he's like, now is the time to ask questions, to say you don't know something, to ask other people for advice. He said, even after you get your patch, continue to ask questions, continue to ask for advice. He said, but especially now while you're learning, this is the opportune time.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always told my students, like, I expect you to fail and mess up in training. Like, we run scenario simulation. I expect you to fail because I want you to fail here than out in the field. Like, we ran um, every year, like, we'll run PHLS. We generally do it up pretty big. So, like, I brought in my son, moulaged him up, and he wrecked a bicycle doing BMX tricks for his YouTube channel and, like, ate shit hard. He had blood all over him. So you had a group of, 5, 6 paramedic students run this scenario, and I mean, and they royally, royally messed it up and straight up killed my son in the scenario. So, and that was their very first scenario. That's how the day started. I mean, and it was like they just got nervous for one. It was like the director's there run the scenario. And it's the director's kid they're taking care of, and they crushed under that. Like it wasn't even a ton of stress inoculation, but it was self-induced stress. I mean, this a kid had a head injury. Somehow they ended up started dopamine drips on him. I mean, just
What?
completely lost path. And it's like, just let them run with it and fail and try to troubleshoot and come back and work as a team. At the end, I'm just like, hey, you fucking kill. Oh, can I say that? I was like, you freaking killed my son. Like straight up, his dead body is on your hands now. And like ran through it. And then once they calmed down, I'm like, what did you do wrong? Like, didn't have to point it out, like, what did you do wrong? Critically think about what just happened. And then they put the pieces together and like, yeah, we shouldn't have done this. This is what we should have done. We missed this, we missed that. It's like, okay, you've learned from it. Good job. And they're like, what? I was like, no, you learn from your mistakes. I'd rather you kill my son here than in real life. People are you're gonna mess up in training. That's what it's for. You're gonna kill everybody. You're you run through scenarios, you're gonna do stuff wrong, but that's why you do those reps and go through it over and over and over again is to, train and get it right. So, like that just relates to, you know, reps relates to everything. So if you have repeated your rookie year 10 times, what good is your 10 years of tenure if you just are repeating the same mistakes over and over? So, like, in with the questions, I would much rather people ask me tons and tons and tons of questions than them to just assume things and, make an ass out of themselves.
So, all in all, transitioning from your EMT to paramedic, you were not expected to be perfect. You were not expected to have all the answers, but you are expected to hold that excellency within yourself, to study, to do better, and to grow. And if you want to add anything, that's kind of my pin in that. You got anything to add for the people?
Uh, no, I think we pretty much nailed it. I mean, you've just this is one of those careers that it truly takes a special kind of person to work in this field and really want to do this. So do it for the right reasons. Go, push, strive. Just if you're gonna do it all the way.
And no, you won't be doing it for the pay. And when you transition from EMT to paramedic, the reports are horrendous. So keep that in mind. But that's all I got. Ben, if that's all you got, go ahead, wrap this out.
Yeah, I mean, always carry a good pen, something sharp, and an open mind.
Because we run with scissors, right?
Yeah, I mean, I got a caveat to that. I said always carry a pen, but NRP stands for no required pen. Uh,
The amount of pins I've stolen from like nurses in my EMT are astronomical.
Here's what happens to me: I get all these pens that I collect and I like, and then I just leave them on my desk. And I start with one here, and then I come home with two pens that I never started with.
They just accumulate.
Yeah, legit. On like my TV stand, you got this little box I put like my knives and pins in, and there's just opened it this morning. I'm like, where the hell did all these pins come from?
It's a black hole that they just appear.
Yeah, I'm a klepto for pins, I guess.
So Ben, that's all you got. That's all I got. And as we close out every episode, so with that,
the 22 at the Lips podcast is designed to support, not replace, the relationship that exists between a practitioner and his or her medical director. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host, guest, and not necessarily of Master Medics. The information provided during this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for your approved protocols.